Jon Mendez here, and on this time's how-to we're going to have a quick look at anti-fouling. Now there's lots you can do. You can do a full hull peel strip and right back and undercoat and all those things. Somebody did that over there in the yard. Or we can do more gentle stuff, which is just a gentle area of prep, remasking and putting anti-foul around, particularly the boot top area and then the whole of the hull underneath. Really depends what your boat needs. The one we've got here had a 2-year anti-foul put on it 18 months ago, and it's actually in really good condition. So we're just going to redo the boot top and a central panel just to bring it up to standard for the season. Now, anything to do with anti-foul, it's pretty nasty stuff. I mean, its whole purpose is to stop growth on your boat. So to that end, you've got to be really quite careful. Personally, so I've got some old overalls on, and they pretty much keep the worst of the dust and the paint off me. And then when I'm under the boat, I wear a hat. I'm always going to be wearing gloves. If I'm scraping or sanding, I'm going to have a mask. And then I also use knee pads, and if I'm under the boat for a prolonged period, I use an old cushion to lay on as well. So you've got to think about your personal safety. On top of that, because anti-foul is not very nice, you've got to really think about when you're cleaning the boat to prepare it for anti-fouling, what's happening with dust or paint flakes, and how you're going to dispose of all of that. So all some very important things to bear in mind before you even start. And at the end of it, you need to clean up, so all of that is put away environmentally safe, so it goes in the right bins and it's disposed of in the correct manner. So prep-wise, the actual surface of this boat's not too bad at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run over it with my scraper. This is a carbide edge. And then just to key the surface, I'm just going to go over with a fairly coarse emery paper just to bring it up to a surface that the paint will stick to. Now, some places you're not allowed to do this dry. Dry sanding's banned and you have to do it wet. That's messy and quite difficult, and you have to wash it all down after to get all the particles off. So I'm lucky here, I can do dry sanding, but I need a mask and glasses because otherwise bits go everywhere, and that's not good for me. So one of the issues that I have is that when I'm wearing a mask and glasses, I find I fog up. I can't actually see what I'm doing very well. So I'm going to lose the glasses for a minute. And all I'm trying to do with this is just remove any nasty high spots. So if I scrape really hard, I can take it all the way back through the coats almost to GRP, which I don't really want to do because this is nicely keyed and nicely finished. But I do want to remove any harsh bits or anything that's a bit lumpy. There's a bit there. Once I've done that, I then take my sandpaper and I just rub just to get a nice keyed surface and the loose bits moved. There's a little bit along the edge here, which I might just have another little go at. Okay, so now I've actually prepared the surface, I now need to give a wipe, particularly where I'm going to mask. So this is just a dry cloth. And there's a lot of debate about do you do the anti-fouling before you do the polishing. So, you know, there's never a correct answer. For me, I tend to polish the boat down to the waterline where it's going to be first, because otherwise I find you end up with polish on the anti-foul. Yes, you can mask it, but it doesn't work particularly well. So I prefer to polish the hull. So I've got a nice smooth surface for my tape to set to. Give a good clean off so that I'm not putting paint onto dodgy dust. And then the next thing to do will be do some masking up so that we get a nice straight edge. Now, 2 things I've learnt over the years of doing this. Do not buy cheap masking tape. It's A, not very sticky. B, if it does become sticky, it's then a so-and-so to get off. But more importantly, it doesn't give a very good edge. Now the owner of this boat found that the waterline wasn't quite right, so he raised it a couple of years ago, which is why we've got this pale a bit. But when he raised it, he didn't really key that paint line very well. So I've given that a reasonably decent rub down to give the paint something to stick to. I don't want the paint to fall off. Because of the rub rails, these rails here, strakes, rails, call them what you like. It's quite difficult, so you have to mask it in quite small sections to make sure you get the line reasonably straight. You can always come back and redo a little patch if you get a bit wrong. And what you want to try and do is, once you've done a fair bit, go and stand back from a couple of metres and see if you've actually got it straight or if it's a disaster zone. That's the sides finished. I've got to do inside the transom, that's a little bit more fiddly. And I take my gloves off, because otherwise what happens is it sticks like crazy and you have this huge battle going on all the time. So gloves off for this bit, I'll work my way all the way around, then we're ready for some paint. Now we've got two sorts of paint. We've got some extra long lasting high strength paint which I put around the waterline on this boat, and we go pretty much down to the first chine. That's because the waterline gets quite grubby, exposed to a lot of sunshine, and the growth happens quicker. And then we use a much more erodible anti-fouling on the bottom of the boat because we don't want it to build up and end up with too much thickness, which needs more scraping and prep next year. The key thing with anti-fouling is that you give it a really, really good mix. So there's half a tin of the strong stuff here. So we have one of these, nice little wooden stirrer, stir like mad for as long as you can bear. It can get quite boring. But what happens is the goodness in the paint settles to the bottom. So we need to stir well enough that that's mixed evenly throughout before we actually apply it to anything. So I'm going to give it a really good shake first. And if you've got paint left, it will sound bizarre, but when you put the top on and hammer it on at the end of the day, give it a shake then and tip it the wrong way up, and then you get a bit of paint around the top and it seals it so you don't get air in for next time. So I've given it a good shake to start the process. Now comes the hard bit, which is usually getting the lid off. So biggest screwdriver you've got. There we go. And the other top tip is that when you take the top off, you're going to put it on some paper, but also put it away from where you are, because there's nothing worse than walking in it. Tuck that over there, nice and safe. And now we can do our stirring. So if I just lift that, you can see there, those big lumps. That's the stuff that we need to be distributed throughout the whole of the paint. So, ready for putting paint in tray. So, again, I don't want to put too much on. If it's a cold day, it doesn't really help things terribly. I've got my roller ready and I've got my brush ready. Now, nobody washes rollers out, so you just buy a pack and bung them out at the end of the day. Make sure they go in the paint disposable bin. Same with brushes. You can spend a fortune on cleaners for brushes. By the time you've done all that, it's usually cheaper to just buy, not the cheapest, but buy fairly cheap brushes and lob them at the end of the day. Saves an awful lot of cleaning up and mess. However, whatever you do, just make sure it gets disposed of in the paint disposal place. A little bit more. Okay. Pop that there. Wipe down there. Pop that out of the way so nobody can knock it over. Same with all this, I'm going to slide all that over under somebody else's boat so I don't have a little accident. Right, now application wise, around the waterline, it depends on your skill level. Some people prefer to do around the waterline with a brush. Always brush downwards away from the edge of the tape. You don't want to brush upwards and push the paint under that tape line. It should be nice and stuck, but it's a cold day and the tape might lift. And I find that I tend to do my very first application with the brush just to get a decent coat on that line. Now, you can do it with a roller. If I get that charged up. Very, very important that once you've dipped it in the paint a few times, you roll it out so that you're not getting loads of splash. And then you can roll on and you'll see you get a nice even application with the roller. Now if you're good, you can then make your waterline nice and even and smooth by using that roller. Now I'm just doing both of these chines at the bow, and then I will move to just the first chine as I get back to where the hole cuts in. And I've got to be very careful not to roll it out too thin. If you angle your head, you can see the light on the paint. What you're trying to look for is an even sheen all over. You'll notice I haven't got my mask up. I find I can't talk, concentrate and breathe all in one. I'd never make a doctor. But I'm being very careful with the paint. I'm not spraying it around, I'm not splashing it. I keep my hat on, A, because it's cold, and B, when I lean against the boat at the wrong moment, it stops me having blue hair and looking like a smurf. Okay, and then we'll go back to roller for a bit. You can see here the shape of the boat's not the easiest. I haven't got a massive amount of room, can't easily roll in big streaks. Now the chines are quite difficult because that edge there, that needs a decent amount of paint on, so I just very gently roll along, and then with the roller I roll it underneath the edge. A little bit more paint needed. So apply, under edge, apply, under edge, edge itself, and then top of edge. So it's quite a complicated little process to get a nice application. So a bit of paint on, roller edge underneath, so that's the chine part, do the edge itself, do the edge above. And when I look along that, I can see I've got a really nice even sheen all the way. It dries quite quickly even though it's a cold day, or rather it goes off and you'll see the colours start to change. So it's really easy to see where you've been, and obviously we've got slightly different shades of blue where the old is much lighter. I'll keep going. So I'm nearly at the end of this side with coat one. Just going to roll in here. And when you get to the end, it's very easy to start being a bit skimpy with the paint. Don't do that. Try and keep the same level of evenness that you applied on the very first bit as the very last bit. And you'll see I'm just rolling over the brushed edge that I did. Again, to try and maintain that smoothness, evenness of finish. All those edges, try and get a really smooth, even coating. And I might sound a bit pedantic about it, but the better you do it, the better it works. I've just got to finish under my edge here, and just here you'll see there's a big pad which is holding the boat up. Now obviously I haven't painted under there, so what I'll do is once I've finished this side, done this side underneath, I'll go and have a chat to the boat yard and say, can they move the posts and the props for me? And what they'll do is put a couple more in on the bits where I've already painted and reposition these onto the bits where I've painted, so I can then paint all of that. I'll have a slight join mark because I've had wet paint against dry paint, but overall it'll be pretty sound. But I just need to be able to do under these bits. Don't ever move them yourself without speaking to the boat yard, because if the boat falls over, that would be a really bad day. One disadvantage with rollers is if you're pushing it into the corners and doing all the edges, is where you push, the end gets cut by the frame inside, so that happens. Now that's okay as long as you remember there's the metal bit of the roller inside and you can scrape things. So you can still use it for a bit, but I will in a new one fairly soon. And then the other thing to think about is that I've used pretty much all the paint in the tray. So I either let that dry or I re-put paint in pretty quickly before it starts to get tacky and then it all gets a bit sticky and nasty. So you can choose, do you want to take the paint tape off in between coats? Sometimes if you're not absolutely sure about your edge or your integrity of it, it's quite a nice trick. Take it off, make sure your edge is straight, re-tape, repaint. I'm just going to show you my little trick. As I started at the bow, if I go the same way, all my overlaps should allow me to pick up each bit of tape as I go. So as I roll, I pull with one hand and I'm always pulling downwards because I want to keep the edge as straight as possible. You can see there I've got a little boo-boo there, that's going to need a re-tape and a paint. But as I pull about 2 or 3 inches and I wrap it into my other hand. And I'm very gently just pulling down because that's maintaining the best I possibly can with my straight edge. And you can see here it's just leaving me with a lovely edge. So I've only got one little bit to redo, which is good. Like it when it goes well. Very nearly at the end. Just going to position myself around the corner because the shore power's in the way. And there's my last bit of tape. And then all I do, because I'm now covered in paint, is I take my glove and I roll all of that into my glove, ready for disposal. So we're just about ready to go back in the water. Antifouls all happened. We've done 2 coats all the way around the waterline. That's our areas for great fouling. One over the bottom area where we already had reasonably sound antifoul, and what was on was a 2-year product. So we've topped it up and got it absolutely super. And I've got a really crisp line. Really happy with that. It's nice and even coat, even coverage, even no growth, we hope.